This is Cheryl.
This is Emma.
This is Catherine.
And we're the Baronesses.
Hi everyone, today we're coming to you from Quandamooka country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, the Quandamooka people, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Baronesses podcast. I'm Cheryl.
I'm Emma.
And I'm Catherine.
And today Catherine's going to be talking about a topic that's important to her and very close to her heart, I believe.
That's right. Thanks, Cheryl. So today we're going to be talking about the fertility roundabout. How far is too far and is it okay to say no? So I think it's fair to say that the three of us have been through a lot of different methods of fertility on our journeys.
Yeah.
And the way that they've impacted us is, similar but also different. So I think it's good to explore the different types of fertility methods that are out there and some of the things that we've been had suggested to us and things that we've tried. Some things are more, normalised than others. So we've looked at a whole bunch of different methods that have been recommended to myself and my husband. And one of the first things that was recommended to us was looking at fertility awareness. And I don't know if anybody's heard of fertility awareness.
No, haven't heard of that one.
No.
So basically fertility awareness is looking at things like your temperature, your cervical mucus, when you ovulate, and a bunch of other types of symptoms that might be involved in tracking your fertility. So in a lot of instances, these methods are used to avoid a pregnancy, but they can also be used in order to achieve a pregnancy.
I see, okay.
But with most of those methods, the rate of pregnancy avoidance is much better than actual conception.
Okay.
I must confess, now that you've elaborated, yes, been there, done that.
What one did you try?
All I can tell you is I was working with a doctor out in the western suburbs who had me using a diary, like a calendar, and tracking my cycle and cervical mucus and temperature. And so, yes, we did all of that for quite a while. Yep.
Yeah. And it becomes all-consuming, really, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because you have to be so aware of everything that goes on for every minute of the day. And, there's a whole bunch of different ones. You've got the Billings method, there's the Creighton method, there's different ones like the Marquette method, which looks at symptothermal symptoms and whatnot. The one that was recommended to us specifically from a doctor in Toowoomba was the Creighton method. And not knowing any better, we thought, okay, we'll give it a try because, we haven't explored very many options. We've only had a lot of what I'm going to say failed pregnancies more than, pregnancies that have actually had a happy ending. So we were kind of willing to have a crack at anything.
Yeah, I mean, when you're at that point, you just want to try anything and everything to get what you want. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we were thinking, what harm can it do? We'll give it a try, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And we actually had to go to classes that were run by a nurse, and she went over this booklet with us on how the Creighton method works. And it wasn't until I jumped into some online groups on Facebook that I realised what the method really involved, because we had the book, we'd read the book, and there were parts of the book that I thought, oh, well, that's a bit interesting. I don't know if I really want to believe that, or should I believe what I just read, because this is almost comical.
So is it tied to religious beliefs, is it?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, we didn't know that at the time, but it turns out that it actually is tied to Catholicism.
Right.
And, having been raised a Catholic but never having heard of this particular method, we were actually really very surprised. And when I asked some questions in one of the online groups, like, how do people feel about the Creighton method, in terms of feminism? A lot of people were saying, well, why does feminism matter? And for me, it really did matter, because in the booklet it told me that my husband was second only to God and that we should pray.
What's that got to do with fertility?
If you don't believe hard enough, you can't have a baby. So it really came down to how hard you prayed, how hard you believe, and whether or not your husband and you check your cervical mucus 17 times a day, or however many times that was specified in the book, just to check to see if it was clear, was it creamy, was it sticky, was it thick, was it stretchy, and you have to give that then a rating, so you can then determine whether or not you are pre or post ovulation.
So do they check everyone for things like PCOS before they go and do this method? Because obviously with PCOS, your hormones are all over the place.
Well, you'd think so.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, is that when I asked this exact question in one of the Facebook groups, a lot of women had responded and said that they actually found out that they had PCOS or endo or a whole bunch of other conditions purely based on their cervical mucus, and that they would never have known had they not tried this method, which I thought was really interesting, because I know medical science has come a long way since the start of Christianity, and I'm pretty sure that some of these things could have been detected via other methods, not involving stretchy, thin, clear, thick cervical mucus. I'm sure there were other ways. But a lot of women were convinced that this is the only way. And when I then went a step further and said, what happens if this method fails? People then basically wanted to tear me a new one, we might say, simply because I had the audacity to suggest that it wasn't going to work, because I didn't believe hard enough. And
so were they just expecting these women to just get pregnant with this method, or they're giving some of these women with PCOS Clomid or any medications?
Yeah, so I think the women that were diagnosed with something were given treatment for that.
Yeah.
But the main aim of the game was to check your cervical mucus, just to see when your most fertile time of the month was, and have that be consistent over the months, and then use selective sex, not spontaneous sex.
So it must have been successful for some people, for them to be invested in that then.
Yeah, that's right. So I think there are some people that it might have worked for. I did run a few stats on that though, and it's got about an average of 98% of pregnancy avoidance, but only a 24% success rate.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, because I know that even with going on Clomid without all this, the success rate's not that great. I think it's like 50-60% after a number of cycles. And I mean, that doesn't even account for people who possibly lose the pregnancy, that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's quite low.
It is really low. And that, again, as you said, that's only accounting for an initial pregnancy, not necessarily carrying to term and having what they might call a live birth. So that's a whole other statistic, really, when we come down to it. But this doesn't take into account a person's age or how it affects male fertility, because this centres solely on women and female fertility or infertility. So they're looking at how they can diagnose infertility just by looking at cervical mucus.
Yeah, and that ignores half of the equation.
It does. And that, again, is bringing me back to my feminist argument about how does this, embody feminism or female empowerment when the onus is solely on the women and doesn't give any regard to the male's input aside from praying.
Yeah, and I mean, it ignores science as well. I mean, we know that, when you look at infertile couples, it's a third is women, a third is the man that's infertile, and a third is like unexplained or both. So it's like it completely ignores that equation. I mean, yeah, we know now that sperm can also, the quality of the sperm can also determine if a woman has a miscarriage or not. And I mean, yeah, where in this method do they account for that?
See, there is no accounting for that. And that was what left me really confounded as to, A, why would we pay money to have lessons on this? And why would we continue? So after reading the book and laughing a lot at the book and some of its recommendations, we shelved the book, for later so that we can, run our comedy skit and moved on. So, we went back to, life as normal. And then we started to, question what else was out there. If people are going to pay for this, what else do people pay for? And at that point, I was very much against paying to get a baby because for me, it's an ethical issue. Should we be paying money in order to get a baby? Or what happens if we were to try a fertility method and come home empty-handed? Then what happens? How do we feel about that? And, the whole exchange of money, in order to be able to get a child, is that ethical? Is it just legalised trafficking by another name? And a lot of things came to mind and were brought up when we started having conversations around what else we should try. So is this how much do we try?
Talking about adoption or also about fertility treatments?
Both, actually. Yeah. So the idea of adoption did come up, and I think we'll save that one for a whole other episode. But yeah, fertility treatments as well. Are fertility treatments ethical, and how far should fertility treatments go? And because we'd had quite a lot of miscarriages, we ended up looking into IVF, and for me, I was very much against it as a whole, just because I didn't like the ethics of it. And then we decided to go to a seminar at a major IVF clinic in town, and there were some people that were on the edge of their seats listening to every single word that was being told and the stories and listening to the outcomes. Me, I was running stats through my head and also watching the dollar signs tick over with every word that they mentioned, because every success story that they had came at a cost. And the more technology that they used, the more cost there would be. But what do you do when you don't have that amount of money? Where does it leave you? And does it mean that IVF is only for the rich, or should it be for everybody? So that led me down a lot of different rabbit holes. And, when we listened to the talk about, what treatments they can offer, how they can offer them, and how effective they were, they only got as far as saying, how many percent would result in a pregnancy, not how many percent would actually end in a successful pregnancy.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of, even some of the research I've seen about live birth rates and things like that, when you look at the fine print, they say live birth is 20 weeks. And that's not actually a child that's going to survive. There's a lot of ethics. I think that, I totally agree. Like they're not transparent enough about the stats and how much money and how many cycles someone might need. And I think it's very different from Australia to places like US as well, where they seem to have higher success rates, but they're way more aggressive with the treatments. It's not clear at all what the actual success rates are.
That's right. And I think too, the difference between Australia and America is that when we go for implantation, in Australia, we're only likely to transfer a single embryo
Yeah.
at a time, whereas in other countries, they may be more inclined to implant multiple embryos
Yeah.
and hope that one of them works. Whereas here, we would do that on every single cycle. And then again, with the cycles, it also will determine the cost, whether or not you're having an egg collection and then the implantation cycle, or if you're using frozen embryos and then having just a transfer cycle,
Yeah.
and depending on what you're having done and whether or not you're having IUI, IVF, or ICSI cycle as well. So there's different things for different needs, but also each one comes with its own set of costs. And different clinics will offer you similar things for vastly different amounts of money.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, I feel in a lot of ways they're very much preying on the vulnerable.
They totally are. And I mean, it's run by there's shareholders in these companies. So they are kind of pushed to pander to the shareholders. So I think there is a bit of an ethical issue with that, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, I know with some companies, they actually have a funding model where you can dig into your superannuation to be able to take out funding from your super in order to be able to pay for IVF.
Yeah.
But, on the one hand, they're saying that it's a medical procedure, that it is just a medical procedure to enable you to have a child. But when you file the paperwork for your superannuation, you actually have to state that it's for mental health reasons.
Oh.
So I actually had an argument with the superannuation company to ask them, why in this day and age is IVF under
Mental health.
mental health, because we now no longer recognise hysteria or women's hysteria.
That is odd. Yeah.
Yeah, it's no longer a mental health issue. So why is this not seen as a medical issue for superannuation compared to mental health?
And it is a medical issue. I mean, it's like one of the leading causes of infertility is endometriosis. You've got PCOS. There's a range of other immunology type issues as well. Then you've got things like genetic issues. It's a medical issue.
It is a medical issue. And so, in my mind, I'm just thinking about the ethics of it all. And, we shopped around quite a lot till we found a clinic that we were comfortable trying. And even then I was still very hesitant because I'm still sort of on this little edge of ethics and whether it's right or wrong and whether or not I should be going through with it. But what I noticed though was that a lot of clinics don't seem to have a good cutoff. Like there's no, rules around when you should stop, how far is too far. And, when we asked those questions at the seminar that we went to, the doctors were just saying, oh no, well, if it doesn't work, we just try more technology. And I'm like, but at what point do you say it's not going to work and that person should stop and cease treatment? Because there's no, feasible outcome, or the outcome is, the percentage is so slim that they may not get what they want after paying all of that money. And then at what point do you say it's not worth it, it's not financially viable, it's not physically viable when you have 1% or less chance of having a live birth or a successful pregnancy? And at what point do we then say no? And the thing that I did notice about some clinics is that they did put specific limits on things. So they might have had a cap on a BMI, they had a cap on age, they even...
Yeah, it was particularly in the bulk billing sector. I know in America, they don't have a bulk billing system. So for anyone that's listening that's American, we do have a bulk bill system, which is a lot cheaper. It's low cost, or you can go private, pay a lot more money. But yeah, it's depending on where you fall, if you can fit into the BMI and the age limits, you can go through bulk billing clinics.
Yeah, absolutely. And, once you have all that information, you know, you sort of have to make those decisions about, you know, at what point do I stop using fertility treatments? And then because we hear all the happy stories, the stories with the successful outcomes, the happy endings, the bouncing bundle of joy at the end. But what happens if you're not getting that success?
Yeah.
At what point do we say no? You know, is there a point that we get to where we just go, I've had enough and I'm just going to stop now? Because I know for a lot of people that I've spoken to in particular, when we've said, no, I've had enough, then we have the people that come and say, oh yeah, but you just didn't try hard enough.
I hate that.
Maybe you just need to try it again and see what happens.
Yeah.
And, you know, that might be the case for some people. Maybe some people have the mental resources, the financial resources, the social resources to be able to do that. But for those of us that perhaps don't, you know, at what point do we say no and not feel guilty about that? You know, there's going to be a certain level of regret. There's going to be a certain level of guilt. And I think, you know, we need to know that it is okay to say no and that we do want to stop, because I think for a lot of us, we get guilted into the idea that because we've stopped, we're
Giving up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you think that these clinics have some kind of responsibility to have that conversation with people
Absolutely.
as well? Or do you feel like from your experience it was just keep going, keep going, keep going, we're going to keep going for as long as you want to keep going?
Yeah.
That's it. I think a lot of clinics sort of push you to believe that you can keep going and that you should keep going without an end point in sight. And I think that's an unreasonable expectation to put on any individual or couple, and just give you false hope, because we know that the older we get, the longer we continue to not have a successful pregnancy, the harder it's going to be, because you know, the longer it continues, the older we're going to be, the less fertile we are, and so we're just perpetuating the cycle. So it becomes this challenge then, you know, how soon can I do it? When can I do the next cycle? Can I afford the next cycle? How much money do I need to do that? And when can I do it? You know, can I do it tomorrow?
Yeah, it's continuous pressure.
It is continuous pressure.
I was just going to say, I was actually shocked to learn how unsuccessful it actually is. I think I was kind of led to believe if you just go have IVF, then you're going to get your baby. And when I started to look into it a little bit more and saw some statistics, I was like, oh my God, that's actually not very good.
No.
Yes.
So I was pretty shocked.
It is really shocking. And the figures can be quite low, but they still encourage you to try it on the off chance that you might actually fall into that tiny little percentage who might get pregnant as a result, and an even smaller percentage who might have a live birth as a result of that fertility treatment.
And I guess there are just enough people around the place who are successful that we go, oh, it happened for them.
Yeah, that's right. And they're usually the louder ones. Like I've noted, like, because we were part of like the group attached to our clinic online. They had like a support group. But, you know, the people that did an unsuccessful cycle, they didn't say, oh my God, I did an unsuccessful cycle. It was mostly the people that said, oh, I have twins and I have 4 babies now they're the loudest in the group.
Well, what is that saying? Laugh and the world laughs with you. Cry and you cry alone. It's kind of similar.
It is very similar to that.
Yes.
Absolutely. And nobody wants to hear the sad stories. We only want to hear the happy stories. And that makes it really hard on us as individuals, because then where do we find that support? And I noticed that it's very different from state to state in Australia when it comes to IVF. In Victoria, there's mandatory counselling that you need to attend.
I wish, I mean, I didn't even go through what you have both been through, but even after my first miscarriage, no one mentioned it. Didn't occur to me that I would even need that. Everyone said, it's just a miscarriage. You'll try again. Everyone has miscarriages. So, I believe there's a big lack of support.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely not enough support. And, not only is there not enough support for women who are going through IVF or ICSI or IUI or any other type of fertility treatment, but if we do have a miscarriage, there is no support, and it's really hard to find somebody in psychology who's actually qualified to deal with somebody who is going through that kind of grief.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very unique kind of grief as well, because you're not, I mean, unless you've had a child and they've passed, you're not actually grieving a human being that existed. You are grieving the non-existent human beings.
Yeah, you're grieving the
Yeah.
life that you never got.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Or the life that you had dreamed of or had imagined
Yep.
in your mind. And so I think for some people it's like an imaginary grief. But for us it's very real. And so it's very, very difficult to find a therapist who wants to, I guess, entertain that, or that can service that need in the community. And I feel with, especially with IVF, having the different rules across the states makes it a little bit harder and very inconsistent as well as to what things that we can access and what support services we can access.
Yeah, I definitely think they need to have better support systems for people who have infertility, as well as like people who've been through miscarriage. I mean, at the moment they put people, going through a miscarriage in the maternity ward, like we've spoken about before.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a complete lack of understanding of where someone's mental health is at that stage.
Yeah. I found that very cruel.
It is very cruel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think all three of us have had that similar experience where we've been put in the maternity ward, immediately after a miscarriage or after surgery because of, having a miscarriage or ectopic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really very difficult when you wake up and you're surrounded by families with their...
And little crying babies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it does make it really very difficult.
Yeah.
And, I think I've written quite a few letters to hospitals now saying that I didn't really appreciate being put on the maternity ward post-op simply because, I'm there for infertility, not because I'm walking home with my little bundle of joy.
No, exactly.
Did you get any responses from those letters?
Oh, yes, I got responses, but not the responses that I wanted.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes, it was all very much, we understand, but, this is where your doctor operates and this is the ward we need to put you on, which doesn't seem very fair or very understanding.
No, it does not. I think they definitely need to look into changing that, whether there's like a separate ward or just putting us with other patients who are not related to maternity.
Yeah.
They need to do something.
Yeah, that's right. Even
Yeah.
if it was just like a general gynecology ward, that would also be
Yeah,
fine, I
totally.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what other fertility methods have you guys tried?
I never, as I said, I never went down anything too intensive or invasive, I'd call it, because I had all my other health stuff going on. So we did that little cycle tracking. I just hadn't heard it referred to the way you referred to it. I think I've mentioned before that I took a lot of herbs and supplements. I had acupuncture. I did go see a specialist, to look into the IVF and everything like that. That guy called me a spontaneous aborter.
My God.
Classy.
And
Yes.
he recommended again that I just keep going, keep trying, come in here, we'll help you. And I'm trying to convey to him, but I've got these complex health issues. And he says, but look at all these women in the third world countries. They're just popping out babies. They got all kinds of diseases.
My
So,
God.
yeah.
And
he
I'm
wasn't-
sure many of those women also are infertile.
Yeah, so he wasn't really taking my unique health composition or my sensitivities into consideration. So yeah, I mean, for me, that the health stuff was always kind of an obstacle, I guess. So yeah, we didn't go too hectically into anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, we tried the supplements as well. I was on like 1 billion supplements. I had like one of them the days of the week, and I had all these pills in each. It was intense and it was expensive. It's so expensive. I did try acupuncture as well.
Same.
Did not work. I was told by a billion people, oh my God, I just did this supplement and it worked the next cycle. And of course it didn't work for me, but yeah, it was just, and I tried different diets as well. Like I tried an
Same.
endo diet, PCOS diet, everything.
I did all the cut out the chemicals,
Yes.
go chemical free
Yes.
living, did all of that. I was using progesterone cream.
Yes, the progesterone
the wild
supplements.
yam.
Yes.
Did all that, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, progesterone, I think that was one of the things that I was also prescribed as a supplementation, just in case I got pregnant. There was a specific day that you had to
Yep.
start using
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
for progesterone support,
Yeah.
and apparently that will decrease the likelihood of your pregnancy ending in a miscarriage if
Yeah,
you've
we
had
did
recurrent miscarriages.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that didn't work for us either.
Same.
No.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
think it's really difficult to find a fertility treatment that works for everybody,
Yeah.
and finding the one that is going to be the best for you. And, like we've all done, we've researched everything, looked at all the different options and tried to decide what's going to be best for us. And then at the end of the day, we sort of have to go, okay, well, this worked, this didn't work. What can we try next? And then the other question is always going to be, do we try again?
Yeah.
And for me, it was a case of, at what point is it okay to stop?
Yeah.
So how did you guys know it was okay to stop?
For me, I think it was when we came to the genetic testing. I thought, okay, this could be an issue. And for us to overcome this issue is going to be very expensive, very invasive. What are all our other options? And we basically, it came down to money, and it came down to health, quality of life for me. And that is where we made our choice. Plus, I'm getting older, so I'm late 40s, and I got to the point where I had to stop telling myself the story that it might happen. It still might happen. So I've actually honestly found this year, around Mother's Day, maybe we'll talk about that in another podcast, but I found this particular Mother's Day harder than any of the others because it was the first year that I wasn't telling myself it might still happen.
Yeah.
So that brought a whole new aspect of grief for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've only really in recent the last year probably gone, okay, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, for us, we were relatively young, We started when I was 31. My partner, Brendan, he was 30. I'm 35 now. We only stopped last year. They kept telling me, oh, you guys are young. It'll be easy. It'll be easy. So easy. It wasn't. Newsflash. We went through the 3 cycles. I looked through all the research. I remember reading so many research papers about how many cycles was most conducive to actually having success, because at some point the sort of stats start to fall off a cliff. And it basically, I got told, between that 2 to 4 IVF cycles that that's probably like the best chance that you have. After that, the chances increase, but very minusculely. And I actually was preparing myself to just keep going until it happened. But it just got to the point where we were on the 3rd cycle. We had done our 6th transfer. We got the call and they said, no, it hadn't worked. And I was just like, I can't keep going. I just can't.
Yeah.
It's just too much. It's an emotional roller coaster. It honestly is.
Yeah, it is.
And I was talking to Brendan, I think he was driving home, and I was just like, I just don't know if I can keep doing this, Brendan. I just don't know. And he kind of said to me, you're kidding, like I've actually been thinking the exact same thing. And we were just like, yeah, we're done. We're so done. I had like, set up a nursery at home. Like I'd bought all these like baby things over the many years that like, even in the lead up before we started trying, I was buying little bits and pieces. And at this stage I had like a whole nursery set up, and I think it was like actually pushing me to keep going.
Yeah.
But now it became like a noose. Like I'm just like hanging myself from this bloody nursery. Like I'm just keeping myself in this cycle, and I just need to stop. And then like I think when we finally were like, no, I can't keep going, I was like, oh, I've got this nursery that I have at home, like I have to keep going. And I think we get like one free psychology visit, like with the psychologist attached to the clinic for each IVF cycle. So I did, for the first time, I actually went and saw the psychologist, and I was just like, I don't know if I can keep going. And she's like, well, what's stopping you? And I was like, I don't want to feel like I've given up too soon and I haven't done enough and stuff. And she's like, well, you've done more than anyone, like most people do. You've done more than what majority of people ever do to have a child. And she's like, you've done enough. And then like, I think that was it. Like everything clicked. It was like, I just needed someone to give me permission.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then like, I think it was like the next day, I just started selling all of the shit in the nursery. I just started selling it all off. And I just felt so light. Those first like few weeks of like quitting, like it felt like euphoria.
Oh, that's it's good.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point that you made, Cheryl, is that, often we are just looking for permission to know when to stop. And I think it's good for all of us to know that it absolutely is okay to stop. If you feel like it's enough, then it's probably enough.
Yeah.
And give yourself permission to say no and to stop if that's what you really want, because sometimes enough is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just too hard to continue.
Yeah.
And we need to know that it's okay to say no, that we don't have to continue, and that we haven't failed. Yeah. We haven't failed as a human. We haven't failed society. And we've tried, and it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
I agree.
100%. Yeah. I think knowing that you can lead a good life beyond infertility and not having a family is very important.
Yep, absolutely.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I guess that's part of why we're doing this is to represent the other possibilities, to talk about it. Not everybody gets that particular experience, but there are, as I've said before, so many other valid and worthwhile and really, really good ones.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but I kept having people tell me, just keep going, don't give up, just keep going. And I just remember thinking, but it's okay if I don't, right?
Yeah.
Like I just remember like just wanting someone to tell me, but it's okay if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I guess not many people do they?
They don't know.
Because the societal norm is to have the family. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we all sort of, we want to feel valued by society and by the people that care about us. But at the same time, we need to know that we're valued whether or not we have a successful pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I think, when it all comes down to it, we are worthwhile, we are valuable, and it is okay just to stop.
It's okay to stop. It's okay to have a different experience. Everything is okay.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
All right. So I think we've covered quite a lot today. So stay tuned for the next podcast.
Yeah. If you have any questions, just send us an email. And there's more information in the show notes.
Thanks for listening. You can find us on Facebook or Instagram, The Baronesses Podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. If you have questions or comments or would like to be a guest in our show, drop us an email, baronessespod@gmail.com, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.